So you'd like to suck a little less at Killer in Dead by Daylight.
Get in, loser, we're hunting survivors.
Hello YouTube, how you doing? My name is Mr. David Ray and I'm an avid Dead by Daylight player. Today I wanted to jump into a short advice video for folks new to Dead by Daylight who want to play Killer but they aren't sure where to start. I'm relatively new to the game myself. I picked up Dead by Daylight on Steam in 2018 to play with friends, but at the time we were all super into Friday the 13th. Moment of silence please for Friday the 13th and my fellow Camp Crystal Lake refugees. Dead by Daylight just sat in my library, untouched, forgotten about until May 2022, but I decided to take my chances. I loaded up the game, and since May of this year I've stacked up close to 800 hours and counting. I'd say about 70% of my time in Dead by Daylight has been spent playing Killer and about 20% Survivor. The other 10% you ask? Filling out the blood web. Dead by Daylight can be a lot of fun, but it can also be pretty punishing as a new Killer player. If you're new to the game, I'm sure you have a ton of questions. Which killer should I pick? What perks should I run? What's the most effective method for chase? What should I even be doing as a killer? How can I get that sweet 4K win?
Why don't my parents love me?
So as a relatively new player myself, I'm here to help you out, but only with DBD related stuff. I can't tell you why your parents don't love you. I mean, they told me the reason why, but they asked me not to tell you. They made me promise. I don't break promises. In this video, I'm going to go over a few general, and I mean super generic and general tips for new players who want to jump into Killer, as well as show some actual recent gameplay to help illustrate some of these points. In addition to this video, I also plan to put out targeted advice videos for each individual killer in Dead by Daylight, so please check back for those. Tip number 1, stay calm. I know this sounds pretty basic, but it's such an important rule. You will get looped in Dead by Daylight. You will get absolutely juiced as a new killer. It is going to happen. Survivors will absolutely dunk on you. You're going to miss a swing. You're going to get baited into a 4-gen chase. You're going to have survivors who hide during the endgame just to screw with you, and it's all going to suck. A lot. But remain calm, even as you're getting juiced, because people tend to make even more silly or stupid mistakes when they're emotional or upset. As you get better at Killer, you're likely going to play even better survivors as your MMR increases. As this happens, you're going to start to learn general patterns that survivors tend to follow, and before you know it, you won't even break a sweat when that juicer fang teabags you after slamming a pallet down on your head, or when 3 survivors body block a hook that you're trying to hang a survivor on. You're just going to be like, okay, next. Tip number 2, location, location, location. Location means everything in Dead by Daylight. Killers start the match on one side of the map and survivors tend to start on the direct opposite side of the map, though there are some exceptions to this rule. Each map has 7 generators for you to defend, and it's up to you to prevent survivors from completing 5 of those generators and escaping. It also helps to not fall into a scenario where the last 3 generators on the map are very far apart, but more on that in a little bit. It's a tall order, but to be a good killer it helps to know where your survivors are at all times if possible. Try to keep a running tally of where survivors are located as you encounter them. What direction did they run off to? What gens are they likely working on? Are they doing some other objectives such as cleansing a hex totem? No, I'm not expecting you to be on the tail of every survivor every second of the game, but having information helps you to plan out your gameplay. Tip number 3, information is your friend. This plays hand in hand with tip number 2 on location, but information is critical to be a successful killer. You can't just march off into battle without a game plan because you will get absolutely smoked. At the start of every match, take a brief moment to gather your bearings. You can see the aura of every generator on the map. Is there a great 3-gen you should defend, to hopefully bait your survivors into the dreaded 3-gen scenario at endgame? Are there areas of the map that aren't worthwhile to defend that you're okay with giving up? Think generators located at the top of the coal tower, the upstairs of the main house of Garden of Joy, the basement gen and the Temple of Purgation. There are some gens on some maps that you just really shouldn't care about defending. Survivors have one main objective, complete generators, and it is your job to make sure that doesn't happen, all while getting survivors on hooks and eventually out of the match. At the start of each match, you want to find survivors, and fast, but should you always give chase to the first survivor you see? It depends. Sometimes it makes sense to give chase right away, and other times it's better to pretend you didn't see the survivor, make a mental note of the general area they were in, and then move to a more strategic area of the map. Tip number 4, don't get baited. Have you ever chased down a survivor, closed a gap in distance, lined up a perfect swing, and then bam, the survivor uses their dead hard and then you have to continue a chase? This tip will take some time to get better at and a whole lot of patience, but don't let survivors bait you into swinging into a dead hard. You won't know for sure that a survivor has dead hard until they actually use it, so always go for the swing when it makes sense. But if you know that a survivor has dead hard, just wait it out. Get right up next to the survivor, have a little patience, and wait for them to burn it. One thing I like to do is jerk my camera back and forth when I'm chasing the survivor. You get right up behind them, and then when they see your red stain move, it could bait them into thinking you're going for a swing, and they might burn their dead hard. If you're using a killer that has an M2 ability that you can press and cancel, such as the Onryo or Wraith, you can also do this to bait the survivor into burning their dead hard sometimes. On the topic of don't get baited, let's talk about chases. Just because a survivor runs up to you to try and get you to chase them doesn't mean you have to. Keep your eye on the prize. The prize of the match is making sure gens don't get finished, survivors get unhooked, and eventually out of the match. Period. If a survivor comes up to you and tries to bait you into a chase across the map to a dead zone, turn your booty around and go back to the area with generators. Always. It's also good to keep your pride and ego in check. You will lose chases. It is going to happen. You need to know when to cut your losses on a bad chase and turn around and go patrol generators. If a chase takes longer than 20-30 seconds to land a hit, you're wasting a lot of time. Tip number 5, learn your maps and loops. At the time of making this video, there are more than 35 different maps in Dead by Daylight. That probably sounds like a lot to memorize, but it's really not that bad. Many maps are different flavors of a common realm, such as Batum, Coldwind Farm, Autohaven Wreckers, and Macmillan Estate. And even among these different realms, there are similarities that apply to all maps that you can use to help you out. Every map will always have exactly 7 generators, 5 totems, a handful of chests, and usually a main building, killer shack, and basement, all strewn about different tiles that have various structures for you and survivors to play around. Generators are usually split pretty evenly, with 3 on one side of the map, 3 on the other, and 1 somewhere in the middle, usually. The only way you can really get more comfortable with maps is to play the game. But if you want to familiarize yourself with the various maps, you can check out the official Dead by Daylight wiki at the link in the description of the video. Let's talk about looping. There are a few basic maze tiles in Dead by Daylight that you'll encounter. TNL walls, short wall jungle gyms, long wall jungle gyms, 4-wall gyms, pallet gyms, and then the various tiles unique to individual maps. The layout of the tiles are pretty simple, and you can familiarize yourself with them pretty quickly in game as you approach them. Some basic tips for chase and looping. Stay on the survivor if possible. Staying in chase helps you to build up the various stages of bloodlust, making it easier for you to close the gap and get a hit. Know where the entrance and exit points to a tile are located. Only break pallets when it makes sense to do so. If you just enter Bloodlust and a survivor throws a pallet, if it's more advantageous to sidestep the pallet and continue chase, do so. Hitting a survivor, breaking a pallet, and breaking a chase are the ways that you lose Bloodlust. Exploit patterns. Good survivors are going to pay attention to your movements and how you play around tiles. If you're a player who consistently runs tiles a certain way, survivors are going to pick up on that. It's sometimes good to introduce a little randomization into how you play around tiles. Catch those survivors off guard. Try to anticipate where survivors will go. If you've been paying attention to how a survivor moves, try to get ahead of them and cut them off. Window snipes. A survivor is looping you around a tile and you notice that they hug the wall next to a window. Swing through it. You can hit survivors through windows, as well as short and medium walls and various tiles. Lastly, we don't respect pallets in this house. You swing through that shit like you don't have a care in the world. Now, this really comes down to personal preference and the killer you're playing, but I usually swing through pallets because it tells the survivor that they need to drop pallets right away. This can help you get them out of the way for later. And sometimes, RNGesus is on your side and you'll connect a hit and get a pallet out of the way. If you recoil and putz around pallets all the time as a killer and survivors don't drop them, you're just prolonging the chase. Swing through that shit, you're a bloodthirsty killer. Act like it. Now look, there are times when you should wait for a survivor to throw a pallet, especially if they've shown that they pre-drop like crazy, but it all comes down to a few on-the-fly factors during chase that you'll eventually get better at making after some practice. Tip number 6, don't camp, don't slug. Alright, you downed that juicy survivor and got them on a hook. You want to protect it at all costs, right? Absolutely, but don't stand directly next to the hook like a goober. Move away for 2 reasons. The game actually penalizes your chase emblem for standing within 16 meters of a hooked survivor after 10 seconds. But more importantly, you aren't applying pressure to other survivors by standing next to a hooked survivor who can't really do anything but just hang there. There are times when it makes sense to camp a survivor on hook, such as during the endgame collapse, when there are only 2 survivors left in the match, or if they've been on hook for a long time, no survivors have come to rescue them and you're trying to ensure a second hook phase or getting them out of the match. During those instances, absolutely camp until your heart's content, but don't stand at the hook and swing at them. That's such little dick energy. Before I go into slugging, one caveat. This will all likely change in an upcoming patch. Survivors will have base kit unbreakable, giving them the ability to pick themselves up off the ground after 45 seconds. 45 seconds is the timing that was used in the PTB, but this could change. It's still TBD when base kit unbreakable is going to be rolled out. Slugging makes sense for some killers and really complements their playstyle. Think Oni, the Twins, Myers when he's rockin' evil within 3, the Plague with a belly full of corrupt purge, a specific build for Onryo if you're trying to condemn survivors quickly. Slugging just makes sense sometimes, but it's very situational. Most times, I'd choose to slug if I just downed a survivor and I know there's somebody with a flashlight waiting around a corner to try and go for a save, or if there are 2 survivors left and one just got plucked off a hook. And sometimes, slugging can give you the pressure of hooking a survivor without actually having to hook them. Maybe there are no good hooks around. Maybe a survivor ran you to a corner of the map or upstairs somewhere and you know they have boil over.
Lay there and rot, you dick.
But most times, I choose not to slug. Again, if the perks and killer you're using benefit from a slug-heavy playstyle, go for it. Tip number 7, learn your playstyle and your perks. Which killer is quote-unquote best is somewhat subjective and depends entirely on your playstyle. Do you enjoy going for a more sneaky or surprise approach? Do you prefer the ability to teleport across the map or have high mobility? Do you want to be able to hit survivors from a distance? If you're brand new to killer, I would recommend that you play a variety of them to get a feel for different abilities that feel like a good fit for you. The built-in difficulty ratings for killers are a good baseline for figuring out if a killer is actually difficult to play, although I think some of these ratings are super subjective. My best advice, don't be intimidated by a new killer you haven't played before. And listen to me, you are going to flop with that killer. Hard, and that's okay at first. Do you think Bob Ross just picked up a paintbrush one day and was like, let's make some happy trees over here? Nah, that dude was probably garbage at first and could barely draw a stick figure. You're gonna get better eventually. Just give it time, be patient with yourself, and be okay in your abilities with where you're at. And overall, have fun. Let's talk perks. Perks are so important in Dead by Daylight, and they can absolutely carry you to a win. I'm not going to subject you to a 6-hour dissertation as to why I think X perk is the best thing in the game, so what I'll say is this. There are some universally great perks that most killers run, such as Pain Res, Jolt, Overcharge. Then there are some garbo perks that next to nobody runs. Unrelenting, Territorial Imperative, Zanshin Tactics, and then there are some perks in between that compare well with specific killers. Read about perks. Understand how and when they get used. Think if they'd be a good fit for a particular killer. Mix it up. Find something that feels good for you. My last tip. Play some survivor games. I know solo queue can be a pain,
Why does everybody fucking DC all the time?
but your killer gameplay will improve vastly if you understand how the survivor side of DBD works. If you get better at looping and evading a killer as a survivor, you'll have a much better understanding of how to mind game and find survivors when you play killer. That's going to do it for today's video. I'll drop some links in the description below where you can find some more information about killers and various aspects of DBD. Please don't forget to drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and hit that subscribe button so you'll always be alerted to when new content comes out. Are there any specific questions you have that weren't covered in this video? Drop them in the comments down below and let me know. My name is Mr. David Ray. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time, and good luck out there in the fog, my fellow nerds.